already proving with archaeological evidence that everything that was written about this temple was wrong. She was a mother, she was a wife, she was a queen, she was a goddess. And we are trying to find out what it led us.
We've always been told that Cleopatra was the most beautiful woman in history, but new DNA studies and forensic reconstructions hint at something far more unsettling. The last pharaoh might have carried a biological danger within herself. For the first time, scientists have analyzed Cleopatra's genetic markers, and what they uncovered is disturbing. It suggests that her greatest struggle wasn't against Rome at all, but against her own DNA. To understand why Cleopatra's genetic analysis has caused such a stir, we have to go back to one person, the Martinez breakthrough, the geometric miracle. For 2,000 years, the sands of Egypt have guarded one particular secret, one that has frustrated historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters alike, the location of Queen Cleopatra's final resting place. Most scholars insist she's lost forever, buried somewhere beneath the modern city of Alexandria, swallowed by earthquakes and rising seas. But for the last 2 decades, one woman refused to accept that conclusion. That woman is Kathleen Martinez. Martinez isn't your typical scholar in a quiet library. She's a criminal lawyer turned archaeologist from the Dominican Republic. And she didn't treat Cleopatra's story like ancient history. She treated it like an unsolved murder case. And that shift in thinking changed everything. She approached Cleopatra's disappearance the way a detective tackles a crime scene. Every clue mattered. Every contradiction had to be explained. While the academic world kept searching in the same places, Martinez dared to look elsewhere. Her profile of the suspect led her 30 miles west of Alexandria to a neglected, crumbling temple known as Taposiris Magna. Then, in 2022, the ground beneath her team revealed something extraordinary. Breaking through layers of limestone, Martinez and her crew uncovered something no one expected, a tunnel, but not an ordinary one. This structure is a near-perfect architectural twin of the famous ancient Greek tunnel of Eupalinos. Carved deep into solid bedrock, the tunnel stretches more than 4,300 feet, almost a mile, standing 6 feet tall, filled with mud and water, and extending straight toward the Mediterranean Sea. Engineers are calling it a geometric miracle. It's the kind of precision construction you don't design for a minor religious site. You don't risk tunneling 40 feet underground through unstable rock unless the destination is critically important. And that's where the next clue comes in. A submerged port discovered off the coast hints that this wasn't just a forgotten temple, it was a major ceremonial center. And according to Martinez, this tunnel wasn't random. It was built to lead to one final extraordinary location. Her theory is simple and chilling. Cleopatra wasn't just trying to escape death. She was trying to escape Rome. She knew Octavian wanted to drag her through the streets in chains, and she refused to give him that victory. She wanted to lie forever beside her great love, Mark Antony. She wanted to be remembered as the earthly form of the goddess Isis. To make that possible, she needed a tomb that could never be discovered, never desecrated. She hid herself in a place she believed no Roman would ever think to search. And Kathleen Martinez may have found the entrance to that sanctuary. We haven't uncovered Cleopatra herself yet, but the clues coming out of the site point toward something unsettling about the end of her dynasty. The clue of the golden tongues. Inside the temple complex, the team stumbled upon another discovery that sent chills through them. 16 rock-cut tombs held mummies, yet these weren't ordinary burials. When the archaeologists looked at their decaying faces, something gleamed back from the darkness. Gold. Inside their mouths, where their tongues once were, lay thin amulets of gold foil. The ancient Egyptians believed that in order to survive the afterlife, you had to speak to Osiris, the god who ruled the underworld. You had to justify your life. A golden tongue gave you a divine voice, the power to speak directly to a god. It granted what they called golden eloquence. But why here? Why at this temple? Martinez believes these weren't random nobles. These were Cleopatra's own people, her advisors, her loyal court. They were buried here with golden tongues, possibly to prepare them to announce the arrival of their queen in the afterlife. Think about what that really means. We're not just digging through a cemetery. We're standing inside a royal waiting room, a necropolis built for someone extraordinary. And if her closest courtiers are here, positioned as if waiting for their queen, then we might be closer to Cleopatra than anyone has ever been. The door is almost within reach. But even as Martinez inches toward the final chamber and the queen's actual DNA, we already believed we had a window into Cleopatra's genetic code, or at least, we thought we did. To glimpse Cleopatra's biology, we don't actually need to find her. We just need to examine the remains of someone she knew better than anyone else. The sister she had killed. The blood rival. To understand the dead buried at Taposiris Magna, we first have to understand the ruthless woman they served. Cleopatra is remembered as a seductress, but her dynasty was a battlefield, and her family tree was more like a nest of predators. And her most dangerous enemy wasn't Julius Caesar or Mark Antony. It was her own younger sister, Arsinoe IV. Their relationship was pure rivalry from the start. When Cleopatra was exiled, Arsinoe took the throne. When Julius Caesar landed in Egypt, Arsinoe led the army against him. She was a teenage warrior princess who actually managed to trap Caesar inside the palace. But history favors the winner. Arsinoe was eventually defeated, dragged to Rome, and forced to march in chains during Caesar's victory parade. The sight of a young girl in shackles moved the crowd to tears. Their sympathy saved her life, and she was sent into exile at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, modern-day Turkey. She believed holy ground would keep her safe. She was wrong. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra convinced Mark Antony to violate sacred laws and do the unthinkable. He sent assassins to the temple. They dragged Arsinoe out and executed her on the steps. The act shocked the ancient world. But for historians 2,000 years later, it gave us something invaluable, a location. For centuries, it was assumed Arsinoe's remains were lost. Then, in the early 1900s, archaeologists in Ephesus uncovered an unusual tomb called the Octagon. Inside, they found a skeleton, a young person in the right place, from the right time period. If the theory was correct, these could be the remains of Arsinoe IV. The timeline fit, the location fit, the age fit. If this really was Arsinoe, then we had Cleopatra's genetic blueprint. At last, we could answer questions about her ancestry, her health, her lineage, everything. But science has a way of shattering even the best stories. The first attempts to extract DNA failed, destroyed by contamination. The bones had been handled and examined too many times, but in 2025, new advanced testing finally gave us an answer. And it wasn't what anyone expected. The African hypothesis. To understand why the 2025 results caused such an uproar, you need to understand the enormous weight resting on this skeleton. This wasn't just about identifying Cleopatra's sister. It was about redefining Cleopatra herself. The controversy began with the tomb. The burial chamber was octagonal, a deliberate architectural choice in the ancient world. That shape pointed to one thing: the Pharos Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the most iconic monuments of Cleopatra's city. Archaeologist Hilke Thur connected the dots. She argued that an octagonal tomb in Ephesus, the very city where Arsinoe was killed, had to belong to the exiled princess. The shape of the structure acted like a stone signature linking it to the royal family. But the theory didn't stop at architecture. It moved straight into biology. The skull found in 1929 had a chaotic life of its own. It disappeared during World War II, presumed destroyed in the bombings in Germany, until it suddenly resurfaced in the University of Vienna archives in 2022. Fortunately, before it vanished, researchers had taken measurements and photographs. And it was from these old records that Thur made her explosive claim. Based on skull proportions, the individual might have had an African mother. That claim ignited a global firestorm. If Arsinoe had an African mother, and she and Cleopatra shared the same father, then Cleopatra herself, long portrayed as purely Macedonian Greek, might have been of mixed ancestry. This idea already had passionate supporters. For years, writers like J.A. Rogers and Cheikh Anta Diop argued that history had whitened Egypt's past. They pointed to the African foundations of Egyptian culture. And in 2023, pop culture amplified the debate when a Netflix docuseries cast a black actress as Cleopatra, sparking worldwide discussion. For those who believed Cleopatra was black, the skeleton in Ephesus became the smoking gun, the only tangible evidence that challenged the dominant view that the Ptolemies were a tightly inbred Greek dynasty. But the 2025 study didn't just reassess the skeleton's biology, it shattered the entire racial hypothesis. The cracked mirror. For years, the Ephesus skeleton had been our only reflection, our only physical mirror, for imagining Cleopatra's face. Scholars believed they were looking at the bones of a queen's sister. But the new study proved they weren't. Scholars thought they saw African ancestry in the skull. They thought they had finally cracked a centuries-old mystery. But when modern technology re-examined the evidence, the illusion shattered. The breakthrough came in 2022. A team from the University of Vienna, led by anthropologist Gerhard Weber, located the long-lost skull tucked away in their own archives. It had been sitting there, misfiled and forgotten for decades. And this changed everything. They didn't just study the skull, they saw inside it. Using micro-CT scans, they built a detailed digital model of the bone structure. Then they drilled into the petrous temporal bone, the toughest part of the skull, a natural vault that can preserve DNA long after the rest of the body has deteriorated. In January 2025, the results appeared in scientific reports, and they revealed something shocking. The skeleton is not Arsinoe. It is not a young woman. It is not an African princess. The DNA revealed a Y chromosome. Cleopatra's supposed sister was a boy, an adolescent boy, somewhere between 11 and 14 years old. And he wasn't just young, he was sick. The scans showed severe developmental deformities. His jaw hadn't grown properly, his skull was twisted and uneven. The results suggest he may have suffered from something like Treacher-Collins syndrome or severe rickets. This wasn't a powerful political rival. This was a child whose face had been reshaped by a tragic genetic disorder. Then came the second shock. His DNA didn't match Egyptian ancestry. It pointed instead to Italy or Sardinia. This discovery opened an entirely new mystery. We thought we were studying the victim of a political assassination. Instead, we were looking at a completely different tragedy. The octagon tomb wasn't a royal burial for an exiled princess. It was a heroine, a monument for someone considered heroic or semi-divine. So why was a sickly, deformed Italian boy laid to rest in one of the most prestigious tombs in the ancient world? Was he a scapegoat? A ritual sacrifice? A secret royal child? A hidden mix of Roman and Ptolemaic blood, whose existence was too dangerous or shameful to acknowledge, yet important enough to bury with honor far from home? Whatever the truth, the idea that this tomb proved Cleopatra had African ancestry was built on flawed science and hopeful speculation. So where does that leave us? It brings us back to the historical record, and that record is clear. Cleopatra came from the Ptolemaic dynasty, and if you want to understand what she truly looked like, you don't need her DNA. You need to look at the disturbing family tree she descended from, because while we don't have Cleopatra's genetic code, we know exactly who her parents were, and that truth is far darker than any debate about skin color. The boy in Ephesus may have been a hidden secret, but in Alexandria, the genetic disaster wasn't a secret at all. It was policy. It was the result of what geneticists call pedigree collapse. In a normal family tree, the branches spread outward. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. The further back you go, the more ancestors you have. But the Ptolemies were not normal. A normal family tree spreads outward like a funnel, widening with every generation. But Cleopatra's family tree didn't open up. It collapsed inward. The Ptolemies were a Greek ruling dynasty in Egypt, obsessed with keeping their power absolute and their bloodline pure. To maintain that purity, they embraced the old pharaonic tradition of incest. They didn't just marry cousins, they married their own siblings. Historians believe Cleopatra's parents, Ptolemy XII and Cleopatra V, were likely full brother and sister. Even their parents were probably uncle-niece or sibling-sibling pairs. It was a dynasty trapped inside a closed genetic loop. Geneticists estimate Cleopatra may have had a coefficient of inbreeding of over 45%. For comparison, the child of two first cousins is around 6%. When royal families in Europe, like the Spanish Habsburgs, reached half that level of inbreeding, the results were catastrophic: deformities, infertility, and devastating illnesses. Take Charles II of Spain, known as the Bewitched. His genetics were so damaged that he didn't speak until age 4, didn't walk until age 8. His jaw was so distorted he couldn't chew, he swallowed every meal whole, he suffered seizures and severe cognitive impairments. When he died at 38, doctors reported his body had not a single drop of blood. His skull was filled with fluid, and his heart was the size of a peppercorn. His inbreeding coefficient was 25%. Cleopatra was almost double that. Why does inbreeding create such devastation? It comes down to a concept called homozygosity. Normally, your DNA is a conversation between your parents. If one passes down a weak or dangerous recessive gene, the other often contributes a stronger, dominant one to counter it. It's nature's built-in safety system, but in Cleopatra's case, there was no safety net. Her parents shared nearly identical DNA. Their recessive flaws matched and multiplied. The same harmful genes repeated themselves like a glitch stuck on loop. There was no healthy gene to override the damage. Biologically, Cleopatra should have been a disaster. Extreme inbreeding typically results in the very problems seen in the boy from Ephesus: physical deformities, developmental issues, and shortened lifespans. Yet Cleopatra defied all of it. But here's the disturbing twist. History doesn't describe Cleopatra as weak or deformed. She was extraordinary. She mastered 9 languages, won over the most powerful men in Rome, and commanded armies. So how is that possible? Was she a genetic outlier? A 1-in-a-million survivor of an inbred dynasty? Or have we misunderstood the signs of what she endured? To answer that, we have to look at the people who shaped her DNA, her own bloodline. Start with her great-granduncle, Ptolemy VIII. Because of how tightly the Ptolemies intermarried, he wasn't just a distant relative. He was practically a genetic blueprint for what Cleopatra might have inherited, and he was a medical disaster. His nickname was Physcon, meaning pot-belly. But that barely covers it. Ancient writers describe him as extremely obese, unable to walk without help, with thin, gauzy robes that shocked Roman visitors. Look closer, and the symptoms become clear: swollen neck, bulging eyes, trouble breathing. Then look at Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, the flute player. He was written off as indulgent, weak, and physically soft. Again, not just personality traits, symptoms. Modern medical historians see a pattern running through the Ptolemaic line: genetic metabolic disorders, organ scarring conditions, and most concerning, signs of Graves' disease, an autoimmune thyroid disorder. Graves' disease causes bulging eyes and a swollen neck, but it also affects behavior. It overloads the body with thyroid hormones, creating hyperactivity, rapid speech, sleeplessness, and impulsive decision-making. Does that sound familiar? Cleopatra was praised for her tireless energy. Ancient sources say she barely slept and was constantly on the move. We've always labeled this as brilliance. Now some researchers wonder if it was a symptom, a genetic storm passed down from her own family. Next, let's look at the physical evidence we do have: her coins. On her silver tetradrachms, we see the same family traits: the hooked Ptolemaic nose, the strong jutting chin, the thick neck. Not the face of a fragile beauty, the face of someone fighting against her own biology. And beneath that surface, the genetic strain continued. The Ptolemies were prone to fibrodysplasia, bone fragility, and jaw deformities, the same kinds of issues seen in severely inbred populations. Then there's obesity. Ptolemy VIII was legendary for it. Did Cleopatra carry the same predisposition? Some experts think her famously small, controlled figure may have been the result of constant discipline. a lifelong struggle against a metabolism primed for extreme weight gain. In other words, her greatest battles may not have been political at all. They may have been fought inside her own body. Her petite frame may not have been a beauty trait at all. It could have been the result of hyperthyroidism, a condition that burns through calories so fast it can keep someone dangerously thin. So how did she escape the full collapse of her family line? That question divides scholars into two camps, the medical victim theory and the genetic miracle theory. The medical victim theory. This theory argues Cleopatra didn't escape the damage. It says she survived the deformities, but not the deeper genetic cost. And one of the biggest clues comes from Plutarch. Plutarch never outright says she was small or stunted, but he leaves behind two pieces of evidence that modern researchers have reinterpreted. First, the famous carpet scene. Movies show her rolled inside a luxurious rug, but Plutarch says she actually hid inside a linen sack, like a laundry bag, then was tied up and carried on the back of a single servant. For that to work, she had to be extremely light. That suggests she wasn't tall or imposing, she was tiny. Second, Plutarch bluntly comments on her looks. He writes that Cleopatra's physical beauty was not in itself so remarkable. Her real power came from her voice, her presence, and her intellect. Combine those hints with a 45% inbreeding coefficient, and petite starts to look less like a charming trait and more like growth restriction. This theory argues Cleopatra may have been physically fragile, battling the same genetic weaknesses that destroyed her ancestors, and using her intelligence to overcome what her body could not. The genetic miracle theory. The second theory is the opposite, and far more astonishing. Genetics is still a game of probability. Even with extreme inbreeding, there's a small chance a child can inherit mostly clean genes. Rare, but not impossible. If we look at her siblings, Ptolemy XIII drowned as a teenage puppet king. Ptolemy XIV vanished under suspicious circumstances. Arsinoe was executed. The boy in the Ephesus tomb was severely deformed. Cleopatra lived to 39, had 4 healthy children, led armies, and showed none of the severe deformities that devastated her inbred dynasty. She may have been a rare mosaic survivor, someone who, by sheer genetic luck, avoided the worst of her family's DNA collapse. But even miracles have a cost. Her manic energy, relentless ambition, and risky decisions may have been psychological side effects of thyroid and metabolic instability passed down through generations of incest. The dark interpretation, whether victim or anomaly, Cleopatra understood her bloodline was falling apart. She saw relatives go blind, grow obese, suffer metabolic failures, and die young. She recognized the pattern, and this changes everything about her famous romances. Tradition demanded she have children with her brothers. She refused. Instead, she chose 2 unrelated men, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. What if that wasn't seduction for political gain, but a biological rescue mission? She wasn't expanding alliances, she was expanding her gene pool before it collapsed entirely. The pharmacologist queen. If Cleopatra suffered from pain, fragile bones, or thyroid-driven mania, how did she still rule? Because she wasn't just a queen, she was a scientist. Her pearl in vinegar stunt was chemistry. She had access to Egypt's advanced medicines: opium for pain, Kai-Fi for calming and sleep, blue lotus wine for euphoria and energy. Her knowledge of cosmetics, detailed in her book Cosmeticon, wasn't vanity. It was camouflage. Kohl could reshape swollen eyes, jewelry could hide her neck, ointments could mask skin issues. She may have been the world's first biohacker, using plants, perfumes, and makeup to maintain the image of a goddess while privately treating herself like a patient. The tomb awaits. And now, beneath Taposiris Magna, Kathleen Martinez may be on the verge of finding Cleopatra's tomb. But the meaning of that discovery has changed. If the coffin is found, it won't just reveal a queen, it could reveal a medical truth hidden for 2,000 years. Was she a genetic miracle who escaped her dynasty's collapse? Or a silent sufferer who ruled through pain and chemistry? For now, the tunnel is silent. The DNA machines wait, and Cleopatra keeps her secrets. If you enjoyed this, like, share, and click the next video.